Americanism are
Why is Damon not? Okay, there we go. Yeah. No, I'm not. You can, yes. Having another issue. Hold on. Okay, everybody, bear with me. About to start the show. 1 second. 1 second. There we go. Okay. We are live. 1 second, everybody. I'm just sharing it. Share it now. Okay. Post.
victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.
Welcome. You are tuned in to Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show. every Sunday, 6 to 8 on intermixradio.com. It's a special edition. We're only on from 7 to 8 today. And we have special guests, New York 17 congressional candidate Evelyn Farkas. I believe I pronounced her name right. And okay. Yeah, I can say yes. So we got a lot of things going on right now. This morning, I don't know if you saw our special Black Westchester Power Hour. We dealt with the violence in the Yonkers supermarket. We had a lot of technical difficulties. Hopefully, they have all been worked out, and we'll be good for this interview. As always, we try to bring you as many of the candidates running for the offices in the upcoming elections, so you can get to know each candidate better and hopefully make more informed decisions at the ballot box. I'm going to bring in our guest. Hold on. There she goes.
Hi, AJ. Hi, everyone.
There you go. So we have Evelyn Farkas. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yeah, you did. Perfect. Yeah. It's almost like you're Hungarian American.
Oh, okay. Now that saved me a question of what is that? Hungarian American. Okay. Yeah. So you're in the heavily contested New York 17 congressional race. We've had candidates Mondaire Jones on, Asha, Castleberry Hernandez. We had to reschedule your interview, Catherine Parker and Allison Fine, I believe, which we're just in the beginning of starting to pick those up. So let's get right to it. Tell us, everybody, a little bit about you and why you are running for the seat that is currently held by Congresswoman Mia Lowey, who is retiring and not rerunning for her seat.
Correct. Yeah, AJ. So first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on today. Thank you, Black Westchester viewers and listeners. It's a great opportunity for me to get a little bit out of the house and give you a little sense of who I am, right? So I was President Obama's Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, Eurasia. I worked for him. That was my last job in the government, but I have 20 years experience in the federal government. I worked on Capitol Hill for 7 years, drafting and passing legislation. I'm the only candidate in this race who has that experience. Of course, I advised President Obama in the White House Situation Room. I also was executive director of a WMD commission, which dealt with pandemics. And I also was an MSNBC contributor, so it means I have kind of a media megaphone. But more to the point, why am I running? I am the child of 2 refugees who fled communist Hungary with nothing. My mother literally had a sandwich in her pocket. They got here, they barely spoke any English. They had to work odd jobs. When I was a month old, my dad got a job as library director in Briarcliff Manor at the public library, a job he held for 30 years. He retired when he was 70. My mom was a hospital pharmacist and worked 3 jobs when it came time for me to go to college. St. Joseph's Hospital in Northern Westchester and Westchester County Medical Center. And I learned that I had to work as soon as I was able to, including also taking care of my sisters. I learned the value of hard work. And I grew up very grateful for my country because for me, in my particular situation, I was able to achieve the American dream. But I knew even then I was lucky. It was simply because my parents moved to Westchester, to a nice area where the public schools were really good. And they had a lot of opportunities that a lot of Americans, even then when I was growing up, didn't have. And today, it's even worse. And the reason I'm in this race right now, AJ, is because this president has brought us to the precipice of an environmental collapse. He's put us at risk internationally, even before coronavirus, and he's eroded our economic security every day like nobody's business. And let's face it, it wasn't perfect before. I'm very proud of working for President Obama, and he tried hard. He passed the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't perfect. We needed to do more. We all understood that. We hoped we would get back into the White House and be able to do more. But this president has attacked everything we did under the Obama administration, including passing the Affordable Care Act, and has blocked and eroded women's rights, the LGBTQ rights, civil rights. Frankly speaking, he's racist. He's a nationalist in the worst way. And I can go on and on, but he's eroded what it is to be American, I think. And again, while our country was never perfect, we always tried to be more equal. We always tried to be more fair. And I'm running to try to provide a level playing field. People in Westchester, regardless of their skin color, their ethnicity, their religion, their gender, their sexual preference, their sexual orientation, they all deserve the right to affordable health care, accessible, affordable, quality health care, affordable housing, a decent job, a living, and a good education from K through 12, and then options for vocational and college after that. That to me is the basic kind of foundation you need in order to have access to achieving the American dream. And so that's what I want to fight for when I go to Congress.
Now you mentioned working with President Obama dealing with Russia, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So outside of regular questions about your candidacy, I just wanted to just get out the way. So, it's largely believed that Russia had interfered in the 2016 election, and we have not done much to prepare for them to continue to do so in the current this current election. Being in that you used to address President Obama on Russia, could you speak to that if you like?
Yes, absolutely. So AJ, this is a huge problem. This administration obviously denied at the highest levels, not the whole administration. The intelligence community said Russia attacked us and it tried to manipulate our elections, or it probably did manipulate our elections. Certainly the president has denied it. And the Senate under the Republicans has blocked aid until the absolute last minute when we were calling Mitch McConnell Moscow Mitch. They passed some funding. But the president took down the czar, the cybersecurity czar, that would have helped coordinate a federal and then state-by-state effort to prevent Russia and, frankly, other countries from meddling in our elections. So we are still vulnerable, AJ, to Russian interference in our elections. It may be less of a vulnerability if we go to a mail-in election. You mentioned the ballot box. Here in New York, probably, we already know the governor has given all of us the option to vote from home, and he's going to be sending everyone automatically an application to fill out so that you can get an absentee ballot. So you fill out that application, you send it off, and then an absentee ballot comes back to you, then you vote, and then you send that back out. That actually may help with this whole Russian problem, oddly. But the Russians are still meddling. They're using disinformation. They're spreading disinformation. Things like, for example, our racial divide. We know that they used that during the elections to suppress the vote. So they sent Facebook messages to African Americans telling them that Hillary Clinton was not on their side, and so they shouldn't bother voting anyway. And it turns out the intelligence community was able to track that, and it turns out it actually did suppress the African American vote for Hillary Clinton. So they were effective in the last election, certainly in targeting communities using Facebook and other means.
Now, you mentioned, and I've reported on the whole absentee ballot situation, and what you just explained, that everyone will get a form. Well, it's supposed to. Every registered voter is supposed to get a form mailed to the mailing address that they have on registered with the Board of Elections. I've received a bunch of comments. A lot of people feel that is going to be voter fraud because of that. Like, it's going to allow a lot more voter fraud for them to stuff ballot boxes or whatever. How do you feel about that, if anything?
Well, it's a valid question. I guess it depends how they do it. If they do it the way they do the census, where they have, it seems like, I filled out my census online, but I got something in the mail, and there was a special code just for me, right? So no two people can fill out my census, and the census number was tied to my residence, right? So if they do something similar like that, I don't know if they have the time or the ability, but if they do, that to me seems like a safe method. But your question, the listener asking the question is asking the right question. We need to keep our eye out, our ears out. But I have to say I have a great deal of trust in this governor, which has been increased only by his performance in managing the corona crisis.
Right. And the other part, that was with mailing it in. And one other person said, how does that stop someone from actually mailing in their absentee ballot and then showing up at the polls that day and voting? That's
another good question. I don't know. I think Yeah, I mean, I think if you send one in and you show up, probably they may cancel themselves out. I don't know what the rules are.
That's what I said. That was my guess that could happen.
Maybe then that you're invalidated. So don't do that.
Right. Well, I responded to the post for everybody reading this. If you have an intention on doing that, a jail cell might be on the other end of that for you. Right.
Well,
so you might not want to do that because that's voter fraud. So
No, don't do voter fraud. Yeah. I mean, I would say, look, the safest thing to do, and this is what the Governor Cuomo is already telling older people to do. You can already get a form online for an absentee ballot. I think you can actually already now get this also just the regular ballot and just send away for it and see what happens, because we don't actually know whether he's going to open polls. Right now we're all in our homes. June 23rd is less than 2 months away. So are we going to have polling? Are you going to want to take the risk of going polling? I mean, people are fine taking a risk to go get groceries because they have to. But if you can vote from the safety of your home, maybe it's a better idea. And I do think it'll be pretty secure.
But my co-host, I'm by myself today. I have my partner Damon K. Jones is not with me, and my two co-hosts Lorraine Lopez and Dr. Bob Robert Baskerville had the personal stuff to take care of. So I'm doing it solo. Right. I'm doing it solo, but Dr. Bob is watching and then sent me a question for you. Okay. So I just wanted to shout him and Lorraine Lopez out and Damon Jones. I wanted to make sure I shouted them out.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Dr. Bob's question is, should I read this right? The U.S. and its NATO allies are witnessing a painful weakening in the international system they were central in constructing. What kind of changes and reforms need to be made in the international system if we are to regain our place as leaders of the free world? Include reforms in NATO, the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, and other pillars of the international system.
Okay. So, Dr. Bob, that's a great question, because here we are, we're all sitting here rightfully thinking about our health. Are we going to survive this corona epidemic? What are we going to do financially, economically? Are they going to go to school? When are they going to go to school? All these questions. Meanwhile, the world keeps turning and these bad guys are out there still plotting against us because they see us weak. We're on our knees. This is a perfect time to make it even more difficult for us. So yes, what we need is a leader leading our country, leading the alliance, leading the NATO alliance, to tell the international community that international law matters, and we're going to back up international law with our diplomacy, with our economic might, and as a last resort, with our military might. That takes leadership. That takes an American president who understands why that's important. So we need to elect Joe Biden as our next president. Other than that, what I would say is, we are in a struggle. Again, this is important because we're in a struggle, democracy versus autocracy. Russia, China, these dictatorships, they don't want America to be a strong democracy, because if we're a strong democracy, we can stand up for all the democracies around the world. We can also stand up for people whose human rights are being abused in countries like Russia, China, and North Korea and Iran. So it's really important, I think, for the human race that the United States have a strong leader at the head of all of the democratic states in this world.
I have another question from a listener that asks, if elected, what committee would you like to be on? That's the question.
Yeah, this is a smart listener. The Energy and Commerce Committee. Why? Because I think so I am going, number one, to Congress. The number one piece of legislation, I have two pieces of legislation that I know I will submit. One of them is to address the climate crisis, so basically putting the Green New Deal into law. The second one is actually the piece of legislation John Conyers submitted every time there was a new Congress, which was to call for the creation of a commission to examine the legacy of slavery and racism and come up with recommendations. So to answer the question, though, because what we have here in our district is the most urgent pressing issue, frankly, from a security, economic, environmental, and personal security perspective, is the closing of the Indian Point nuclear power plant. I want to be on Energy and Commerce because I want to make sure that the full force of the federal government is being utilized to make sure that it's done properly so that we're all safe, so that it's environmentally, done properly, and also so that there's an economic glide path for the people living in that community where the power plant is located and in that area. So that to me,
even though we asked that question, I don't think freshman congressmen actually get to secure. They don't get to say what pick the seat, the committee they're on. I don't think. I don't know how.
So what you do is you tell them your preference. Now, obviously, okay, my number one preference would be the Appropriations Committee, because that's where they, dole out the money. But under Congresswoman Lowy, they had a rule internally in the House that you couldn't, as a freshman, join the Appropriations Committee. You had to earn that right. And I suspect that whoever, succeeds her will keep that rule. So that's why I didn't say the Appropriations Committee. But I do think that, first of all, I know a lot of the members of Congress and the leadership. So I think they will expect a lot from me in terms of speaking out, explaining things to the American people from the House, floor, and also on television. And so in exchange, if they want me to help them lead and get things done, and I'm very good at getting things done in Congress, like I said, for 7 years I did it in the Senate, then in exchange I will hope, that they will take into consideration my desire to represent my district in the best way, which is if I can get on that committee.
Now, so Congresswoman Neil Lowy held that seat for a while. She's loved in her district. So speaking to those who love her, how would you most like to carry on what things she stood for, and how are you most what things would you do differently?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the best way we can honor the legacy of Nita Lowy, she's a trailblazing woman who about 30 years ago was elected to this seat. It was a big deal. She now is probably one of the most powerful people in the House of Representatives. So we're losing this woman who is a powerhouse for our district. The best thing we can do to honor her is to replace her by someone who doesn't need on-the-job training, somebody who has experience like I do already drafting and passing legislation, somebody who knows how to do it, knows the people, somebody who has already managed crisis from inside the White House Situation Room, among other places, somebody who has a national media presence that I can use to draw attention to our issues, whether it's the poor water quality in Rockland, the rising level of the Hudson here in Westchester, et cetera. So I think the best thing we can do is elect someone like me who has experience. The other thing I have is, and this is something I think Nita Lowy has too, is empathy and compassion. I've always heard she's a great listener, and having met with her, I agree, she's a great listener. I've met with her several times. And I also intend to be a good listener, but I intend to really make sure that I'm looking out for all of the constituents in our district. And some of the things that she's worked on, I know people have mentioned to me global education. It certainly dovetails with my desire to boost domestic education. And so I will continue to carry on her legacy in terms of her expertise, her tradition of legislating in an expert fashion, and then also her constituent services. Again, that's something that's really important to me as well, trying to help individual constituents. Sometimes it's important to focus on the big picture and passing big legislation, but it's also important if you have somebody who calls you up and says, I'm not getting my Social Security check, can you help me, Congresswoman, that you help that person.
So I believe in my research, looking this up, over 32% of this district, the New York 17 Congressional District, is made up of Black and brown people. What's your approach to aid minority folks in the 17th district?
Yeah, so first of all, as I mentioned, I really believe that we need to reset the foundation to create a level playing ground for everyone. And Black and brown people have been really, first of all, we've seen it now, it's laid bare for us because of the coronavirus epidemic, but have continued to suffer the legacy of slavery and racism. And so we still, as a society, have not rectified that kind of original sin, if you will. There was also the original sin committed against Native Americans, but I'll leave that aside for now. Right. So that original sin has not been rectified. We need to rectify it. It means, as I said before, putting money into creating a public option which doesn't discriminate based on race, We need to have also affordable housing that doesn't discriminate based on race. We need to have access to education and quality public school education. Now here it's a little dicey because the federal government doesn't control all of this. But what we can do at the federal level is put more money into pre-K, put more money into after-school programs, put more money into making sure you have nurses and therapists in all the schools, and also then do something to raise the standards. Because one of the problems we've seen, especially in Rockland, is an argument about standards. What are the minimum standards? Well, let's make those minimum standards as high as we can at the federal level.
Now, again, I'm going back and forth, and I forgot a few questions in the beginning. I usually ask people to explain, so we educate people, the 17th Congressional District. What does that comprise of?
It's good to know. Like, are you going to have a vote or not? Well, so first of all, I'm running as a Democrat, so it's the Democratic primary that I'm interested in. Obviously, there's also a Republican primary with a couple of candidates there. The district itself is west of the Hudson River, all of Rockland County. And then you cross the river, and on the east side, you have from Peekskill down to Dobbs Ferry, over to Harrison. It doesn't include Ardsley. It doesn't include Scarsdale except for one street. It doesn't include Rye, but it does include Rye Brook and Portchester. And then you go up and it includes White Plains, Mount Pleasant, Mount Kisco, Newcastle, part of North Castle, up to Yorktown. So I kind of gave you, it's like a diamond shaped, spanning the Hudson.
Okay. We got questions coming in. Before I can even get to them, we have another listener, Jeff Monroe. He has a statement, I guess, and a comment, a question. He said the Obama administration spent more money on the U.S. war machine than even the last Bush administration. Increased combat presence from 2 wars to 7, and increased foreign troops deployment from 60 to 138 countries. His administration also validated illegals, unilateral sanctions on Venezuela, and refused to prosecute CIA torturers. Do you feel these policies and decisions were appropriate?
Look, what I would say in the macro is that President Obama worked very hard to try to, first of all, make war, use of force, a last resort, in effect. He recognized the need to withdraw from Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And so I do believe that we need to do a better job in Congress holding the administration's feet to the fire, whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration. And first of all, if the administration wants to keep our troops in these foreign operations, to continue to keep them overseas in these 2 operations in particular, but in other ones, they need a reauthorization of the use of military force. That's something that's been on the table, that's been advocated by members of Congress on in both chambers, Democrats in particular, and we need to get that enacted. The House passed this legislation, but of course it went into what we call the graveyard, the Senate graveyard in front of Mitch McConnell's desk, and so there's been no action taken on it. But if we are to send our men and women into harm's way, then it needs to be a decision made by the United States Congress for it to be valid. It needs to be the decision of the American people. So I would say to your listener, I will work to be part of the solution, part of a responsible withdrawal of our forces from those operations.
So real quick, for everybody who's just tuned in, this is People Before Politics, episode 260. We have New York 17 congressional candidate Evelyn Farkas. She's one of, there's at least 8 or 10 candidates. Oh, it's down to 8 now. Yeah, it was like a soccer team at one time. So you have, she's one of 8 candidates running in the Democratic primary. And I also would like to introduce my partner, my co-host, Dr. Bob, and I'm trying to get him on the screen. He's about to come on in a second. There he goes, Dr. Bob.
You're in your car.
Yes,
I'm running an errand for my mother who is moving up in age. I'm not going to call her elderly, else there will be a price to pay. But, I need a degree in international relations to resolve. But yes, that's what I'm doing. I'm running an errand for my mother. But
Oh, that's so
Just hearing
sweet.
about your background, especially in the Obama administration and the long history in the diplomatic and I guess defense community, um, made me very intrigued. And it's hard to type out questions, and I said maybe I'd take the opportunity to see if I could join y'all on air as I run this errand. I did have a question because I did hear you mention that you were interested in joining the Appropriations Committee, and I think one of the challenges that has become apparent with Donald Trump's presidency is the degree to which the balance of power between Congress and the executive branch has tilted and askew
Yeah.
now.
Mhm.
And I think some of the president's unprecedented efforts to essentially unilaterally expropriate money from Congress, whether it be for the wall or in the case of some of his actions around Ukraine, I believe also.
Yes. Yeah.
What can Congress do in order to ensure that no president, even a president who's not willing to respect the normal relations and the balance of power between the executive and legislative branch, what kind of legislation can be passed to make sure that the president does not try to overstep their boundaries and sort of take that money in ways that are harmful to democracy?
Yeah, no, I mean, so Dr. Bob, this is a really key question. The Constitution, you shouldn't have to pass a law. The Constitution actually provides, it says very clearly that Congress has the final say when it comes to spending money. So this president is breaking the Constitution, the biggest law you can break. Frankly, I'm surprised that it hasn't gone to the Supreme Court yet. So I don't know if that's simply because Congress hasn't pushed it up that way, or nobody has, suffered as a result of this and brought a case. I don't know what it takes. I'm not a lawyer, but I have been appalled to watch how this president take the funding from the Department of Defense that Congress specifically said he cannot use. I mean, they specifically said it, and he took the money and still he put it towards the wall. And as you said, then when Congress said you must spend this money to help Ukraine, he dragged his heels and tried not to until, somebody told on him, and the public, found out thankfully through our press, so thank you guys for everything you do. That's the problem, that this president just flouts the Constitution and the law. I think it needs to go to the courts, but Congress needs to keep on pressing this. I'm glad you asked the question, because people should not forget. And members of Congress need to remind the public constantly that this is a president who doesn't respect our Constitution. And, the Constitution has the Bill of Rights in it. We need to do a better job respecting our Constitution, starting with the president.
I mean, this most recent episode around the Ukraine incident was a real educational experience for many of us, because we learned, amongst other things, some of the constraints that Congress sought to impose with the enactment of the Impoundment Control Act, which required reporting procedures and approval. And the reason I mention it is, even though it caused such a tremendous controversy, the president has actually repeated this in his decision to unilaterally withhold funding that Congress appropriated towards the World Health Organization. Part of it. And again, it seems like even though until now most presidents have been respectful of these unstated norms and explicit constitutional constraints, it seems like more will have to be done if we do not want to see a repeat and a further drift towards autocracy. So,
yeah, absolutely. And what you're describing, I mean, this behavior by this president, it's a whole nother impeachment count against him. I mean, you could have a whole nother impeachment trial based on this alone. But ultimately, Congress has decided, we know, Nancy Pelosi has decided not to press the issue right now. So we're going to the ballot box, and hopefully we can kick the guy out that way. But I'm certain that if Donald Trump somehow gets reelected, which God help us, I mean, we will have an autocracy and we'll have a lot of dead people. If he somehow gets elected, then I can very well see Congress coming, at least the House, and calling again for impeachment proceedings against him.
Real quick, I just we're getting a couple of questions. Shout out to Sandy Barnaby. She said, "Bob, good questions." And Michael Cole left literally a book, and it's too. Can you break that down into questions, shorter questions? I mean, like this is too much for me to read at
You have
one
too
thing.
many
So
smart callers.
yeah, so please. I mean, this is very, very, very long. So and
What's
there is
the
some
topic?
important
I
stuff
can
in there.
riff on it.
Huh?
What's the topic? I'll just riff.
Actually, can you see the comment section? Can you see the comment section on Facebook? Can you?
Oh, hold on, maybe.
Michael Cole, yeah, because it's in the comment section.
Host chat.
It's
No, it's private. Only you.
no, are you
Public?
watching? Oh no, okay, not the chat on the side. Okay, you have to. It's streaming on Facebook, and you have to see it on Facebook.
I don't want to mess.
Comment on Facebook.
I don't want to mess with what I have going on.
Okay,
Here.
no, we don't want you. We were losing. We want to leave that. But if Michael Cole can, I will ask the questions. But if you can break them down to smaller questions, actually questions, I can read them and we can go there. Again, we have, for those just tuned in, New York 17 congressional district. Congressional, district candidate.
Yeah.
Evelyn Farkas. In our interviews we're trying to get to all 8 so far. That you're the third one, and like I said, we have Catherine Parker and then Allison Fine coming next, and we're trying to get to the other ones. We had Mondir and Asha on earlier.
You have all the ladies done first.
Right, okay. Okay. Well, no, Mondir was actually the second one. So he was actually, yeah. So can you speak to your platform? What's important to you? What you want people to know that you're running on or whatever?
Yeah. So I mentioned already. I think the number one issue that I want to tackle, that I have to tackle, is the climate crisis, because literally our Earth is on fire and melting. So there's nothing more important than addressing that. It affects everything. It affects the air we breathe. It affects the water we drink. We know it disproportionately affects communities of color, lower income communities. We need to have a Green New Deal. I would like to, as I said before, I would like to enact some legislation or sponsor some legislation that would implement the Green New Deal's a vision. We need to implement it with legislation. What does that mean? We need to eliminate the subsidies that go to fossil fuel companies, take that money and put it into renewable energy. We need to then put a whole bunch of money into infrastructure. And before all of this, we actually need to enact tax reform. We need to remove the cap on the SALT tax deduction, the $10,000 cap, and we need to enact higher tax brackets on the very wealthy in our country who are getting away with paying too little in taxes. Yes, and take that money and put it towards, like I said, this Green New Deal implementation, including infrastructure, a public health care option. Everybody has the right, a human right, to healthcare. It's a universal right. We need to enact a public option. I'm not saying to get rid of the private one. A lot of people get nervous about that. They believe their private option covers them. I don't want to put more people at risk, unnecessarily. So let's create a public option that's affordable. I'm on this horrible Trump care. It's way too expensive. So we need to create the public option. And then we also need to create avenues for affordable housing. What does that mean? Funding for HUD it's 1/3 what it was in the 70s. So we need to increase funding for HUD. We need to provide more incentives for affordable housing. That also means being creative and helping localities with zoning so that they can repurpose existing buildings like malls that we might not need anymore. And then we need to do more. There are a whole host of things. We need to, first of all, provide gun safety. So do something about gunfire on the streets and in the classrooms for once and for all. That legislation is another piece of legislation in that Senate graveyard, in the graveyard in front of Mitch McConnell's desk that Nancy Pelosi already passed. But I would definitely go and make sure we pass it again in the new Congress, because you have to do that again. Every new Congress pass the legislation again. We also need to protect a woman's right to choose and access to healthcare, access to abortion. And that means we need to put Roe v. Wade into law. And there are a whole host of things we need to do. Childcare. We need to make sure that we have family medical leave. All of these things that now would be, with coronavirus hitting us in the face, people are realizing, whoa, our system is not equal and it doesn't protect everyone equally. And our frontline workers are suffering more than middle-class white-collar workers. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people recognize this already. Now it's out there. No one can ignore it. And in a sense, this horrible pandemic is an opportunity to go in there and legislate and fix this stuff, create a new, better America.
I wanted to make it one comment and then a question. When everybody's talking about climate change and everybody's talking about, Green New Deal, one of the things our partner and I were talking about recently, this actual pandemic and social distances is actually, if you look for a silver lining, with your body, sometimes you have to fast and you have to detox to get the stuff out of it you don't need. Right now, it's like this is a detox for the world. There's a whole lot less planes flying. There's a whole lot less cars on the road. We're putting a lot less pollution right now out into everything. And the world is getting a chance to breathe for a minute, getting a break, because we are definitely, damaging our planet. So anyway, that was just my silver lining.
And I love it because it's evidence. Go show that to, Jim Inhofe and others who show the snowball in the Senate and say there's no climate change. Yes, there is.
Right. So now one of the things we see on TV is the division in politics. The Republicans want to blame the Democrats for everything. The Democrats are blaming the Republicans for everything. It's hard for them to work together, it seems. If elected, how will you navigate with those on the other side to get things done? How.
So for me, this is no problem, AJ. Like I said, for 7 years, I legislated, drafted and passed legislation, helped my senators pass legislation. What that means is I worked across the aisle. And not only did I work across the aisle, I worked across the aisle with the same people. So you really have to develop real trust and really good negotiating skills, because you can't just play a trick and once and then expect the next year you're going to pass legislation with the same people. So I developed a lot of, good relationships, like functional relationships with people that I don't agree with on policy. And that's how you get things done in Congress. You don't make things personal. You make it about policy. You negotiate from a position of strength. You know your values. Don't cave in, but don't be rude. And you can get stuff done.
I mean, and I hear a lot of people say that, but then we see what plays out. We see what plays out in the chamber. You know what I mean? We see the divisiveness where the Republicans, they just pick a stand or defend the president, and they, whether it's right or wrong, you know what I'm saying? And instead of working together, we're spending too much time blaming each other and attacking the other. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done that's not getting done.
No, I mean, this is why, I was talking to someone very senior in the New York delegation. I won't drop their name, even though I'm so tempted. And they said to me, we need more technocrats. We need technocrats in Congress. People who don't go in there and breathe fire just to make a stand. We need to get things done. And technocrats like myself, I know the mechanics. It's not very exciting to be called a technocrat, but that's okay. If I can deliver for the district, which I can, call me a technocrat.
Okay. I try to get this in at some point. For people that's just, they want to know more about you, there's only so much you can say in an interview.
Yes.
What website, social media, how do people contact you, etc.?
Okay, so go to Evelyn for, like FOR, NY.com, Evelyn for New York. You can see behind me my little logo, Evelyn for New York. I also have a Facebook page. It's Evelyn for, and then the New York is spelled out. I'm on Twitter, and where else? Instagram, all the various, places where you think people should turn up. I have a whistle stop tour, which has been going through every community. I love it because it envisions a train across our bridge. We don't have a train, right, as we know, across our bridge, but across the Cuomo Bridge. But this envisions a train crossing it. And we've already hit, yesterday we were in Peekskill, so we hit Orangetown, White Plains, Peekskill, and we're going through the various towns in our district. So if you go online, if you go on my website, or if you go on Facebook, you can see where we are. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m., we have something called a virtual forum. This last week, it was with Dr. Zeke Emanuel. It was on the coronavirus and what to expect, how to prepare mentally. This week, it's on immigration, and we have an expert from Rockland who runs the Community Advocacy Center over there. 2 weeks ago, we had Dr. Maureen Ramo, also from Rockland, from Columbia's Lamont Doherty Center. She was talking about climate change. Stay tuned. You can see what the upcoming ones are. We have Taco Tuesdays if you want to donate and get involved that way. Those are lower dollar events. We take volunteers. So if you get on my website, we'd love to have you take a lawn sign, make phone calls for us, send text messages, send postcards, all of these things we're doing to try to get the word out. I have to say, I'm running in a race with some very wealthy people. And so I have to fundraise, and I have to work every way I can to get the word out to everyone. So the more people I have volunteering to make phone calls, coming to the whistle stops to hear what I have to say, to tell me what I need to hear, the better off I am. So thank you for the opportunity.
You mentioned money, raising money.
Yeah.
I know I've seen in several races down to school board, going up, even into congressional races. A lot of good qualified candidates can't compete because they don't have money.
Yeah.
And other candidates can outspend them and win, whether they're the better candidate or not. How do you feel about campaign finance reform? And, we want to speak to that a little bit.
Oh my God, campaign finance reform is so overdue. There are so many reforms. We need to have people enrolled to vote when they graduate high school. We need to have a holiday for voting. We need to provide people who were felons, got out of prison, the right to vote again. There are all these, civic things we need to change, civic reforms. And then really campaign finance reform has to be a priority. We need to overturn now I'm going to forget the name of it, but anyway, the court case that allows unlimited spending, basically. There are caps on how much you can raise from individuals in a campaign and from PACs, but there's still way too much money in campaigns and way too much of a requirement on the part of candidates as a kind of hurdle to raise money. And I can have a whole hour-long conversation about it because it's really disconcerting. I'm the top fundraiser. I have the top small dollar donations out of everyone. So I've raised the top amount, which means, that shows my support. So I have the most financial support for my campaign, meaning not myself, but everybody else. I have the largest number of small dollar donations, which tells you, again, something about the grassroots support I have. And I have support, really from all over the district and even from outside the district, because people know my reputation. They know, even though I'm not going to represent them, I'm going to do a good job. And when it comes to national issues that might touch upon their lives, I'll do a good job there too. They know my values. Even people who don't agree with me politically have contributed. But it's really, I find it really discouraging, un-American, undemocratic that we have to do all of this fundraising. I'll just leave it at that.
I had another question from a listener, and then I want Bob to get in because he took the time to chime in from the car. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want him to just be sitting there. But we'll go back. Bob, you got any questions? Let me start with you.
So Ms. Farkas, one thing that I did want to ask, back to the question of international relations, is specifically what kind of reforms, I know perhaps as a member of the Appropriations Committee where you appointed, you wouldn't necessarily be sponsoring foreign policy legislation, but I'm curious to know, again, what kind of reforms you think need to be made to the international system that would go a long way towards restoring America's position of leadership. For example, I have in mind the fact that the United States, though we comprise about 5% of the world's population, we continue to take in a disproportionate share of the world's assets. I think the number, last I checked, was somewhere in the 20% range. Many would argue that it's not possible for us to have a Green New Deal that's going to make serious headway in reducing climate change if we're not willing to provide for the economic sustenance of developing countries where poverty is far too commonplace. So, I mean, there's a lot of justified criticism of the IMF and World Bank policies over the past couple of decades. You'll forgive me, I'm recalling here some of the material that we read on structural adjustment programs and the like that have really put developing nations at a disadvantage. And so I'm just curious, what role do you think you might be able to play, and the emerging progressive Democratic majority might play?
So you're pointing right to why we need to be in the lead on climate change, addressing the climate crisis domestically and internationally, because those things are interconnected. And if we don't do more to address the climate crisis internationally, we will have, first of all, we know if the temperature of the earth continues to rise, we will have more scarcity of food, scarcity of water. What does that lead to? War between humans, war between states, and inevitably that war will result in refugee flows. And that will impact us because the refugees will come where there's less scarcity, which is, by the way, still at the United States of America. So it's in our interest, not just as humans, as moral, members of the world community, to help those poor, suffering people. I mean, my heart goes out to all those people in, refugee camps today who are in those refugee camps because their governments failed them, because the international community failed them. And now on top of it, they're vulnerable to a pandemic, right? Right. So we need to make sure that when we address the climate crisis, we do it also as responsible international citizens, in part because we as Americans like to believe that we have a heart and we are humane, compassionate people internationally, but also for selfish reasons, because we need to make sure that we maintain a standard of living and a safe, stable, secure environment here for Americans. We can't have, unlimited refugee flows coming into the United States either. And so all of this means that we have to lead the international community again. I mean, what's, I think, most upsetting to many of us who have worked in international organizations and overseas is the fact that the United States, not only have we relinquished our role as leaders, but we're like at the back. We look terrible. I mean, we look mean, we look cruel, and we look stupid right now. That has to change.
We got about 11 minutes left. Bob, anything else you want to ask? Anything else you want to get in?
No, I'll defer to you for a moment. If I think of something, I'm getting ready to walk in the house. I gotta get my mom.
We'll come in the house with you.
Yeah.
I'll have my mother wave. My mother's not gonna wave. She don't have all the makeup and stuff. She's a former performer, so she needs to be at her best. That will cause another incident. So
why should people vote for you over the other? There's 8 of you in this Democratic primary. Why should the people in the district cast their ballot for you in the Democratic primary?
Because I don't need on the job training, AJ. Like, I will go there on day one. I know what to do. I'll bring home the bacon for the district. I'll make the district look good. I'm kind of the closest thing you can get to Nita Lowey. The rest of the candidates don't have experience at the federal level drafting and passing legislation. They don't have experience managing crises in the White House Situation Room. They don't have a national media profile that can be used to draw attention to things we care about. They don't have experience running a WMD commission that made recommendations on pandemics. These things matter. Experience matters. We don't want to send someone to Congress who doesn't have experience, because frankly speaking, this is not a moment, again, to take that kind of a risk. So I think people should elect me because of my experience. But then I do think empathy matters. Look, growing up, I needed the help of the government. So did my parents. I know what it's like to need the government. And I understand when government can help people. And that's what I want to do. I want to use the power of government to help ordinary people so that we can level the playing field and people can really enjoy the American dream, which means political freedom and economic opportunity.
I want to, and I know there's not a lot of time, but I saw an article recently, and I like to give candidates a chance to address things that,
sure.
And I apologize because I could not manage to pull the article up, so I like to state where the article is and everything. But it had to do with accepting money from PACs or something. I think you made a statement that you will not, and then they say that you have, and then there was something about receiving funds from groups of Republicans or something. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
I'm familiar with what you're talking about. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
So here's the thing: like, we're in the middle of a campaign, and so probably some of my opponents are interested in having attacks on me. They took in, the information that was used in this article was about people who provided financial support to me. None of them were fossil fuel lobbyists. So the only vow that I took was that I would not take money from fossil fuel lobbyists, because that seems to run counter to my number one area of concern, which is managing the climate crisis. I did not swear off all corporate money, although less than 1% of all the money I have, which is about $1 million, is from corporate entities. It's very, very small. And of course, most people who know me know my values. They know I'm not going to be bought by like $5,000, because that's the most a corporation can give a congressional campaign. In the context of $1 million, so realistically, it's not going to change my policies. But I did not break my vow, and so that's important to note. And the criticism of taking money from Republicans is kind of funny, because the Republicans that are picked on in that article are people like Chuck Hagel, Secretary Hagel, who was Obama's Secretary of Defense. So he's a Republican who supported President Obama. And maybe we don't agree on everything. I don't know. I didn't ask him. But the man is supporting me because he knows me. He knows I'm a hard worker. He knows I get stuff done. He knows my values. Same with all the other Republicans who provided money to me. There's no purity test. If you want to support me, and you understand my values, and most of these people, look, these are individual donations. They know me. They're not providing funding to somebody they don't know. They know me because they worked with me before. So they may not agree with me on everything again, but they know I can get stuff done for America. They know I have the best interest of my district at heart, and that's why they're supporting me.
Bob, I don't know are you on, Bob? Any questions?
I'm here. I think I've exhausted about all the questions that I have for now. I do want to tell you, though, Evelyn, I do wish you well. You sound like you bring with you a wealth of experience and a progressive vision that I'm glad you had an opportunity to articulate and share with the audience. I guess one question I do have, I'm curious, based on your discussion of your policy vision, why it was that you were not able to garner more support from the better known elements of the progressive community. I know that your competitor, Mondesir, whatever the big progressive organization, I don't know. And, what do you think accounts for that?
Yeah. And I apologize, it got dark in here and I don't want to move away from the camera to turn the light on, but so you can sort of still see me, right?
Yes.
So anyway, look, I think a couple of things, Bob. Mondaire got into the election way before I did. So he was well known already. I only entered the election in November because Nita Lowey was retiring. I did not see any need to challenge her. She was one of the most powerful people in the House of Representatives. Why would I challenge her? She's done a great job for our district. So I was not interested in challenging her. But Mondaire did challenge her. He was in the race already last summer. And so progressive groups got to know him early. And for me, I had to, catch up then. And I think many groups already had their mind made up, frankly. But the other thing is there is one difference between us, which is that he wants Medicare for all. And I have deemed it I've deemed it too risky in terms of jeopardizing the people who are on the private plans, and also, frankly, not practical. So again, I'm friends with Zeke Emanuel. He was the architect of ACA for Obama. They would have liked to have done more, but realistically, then and now, it's not possible, and it's not responsible, like I said, because of the people who are on the private plans, to suddenly shift overnight to the Medicare for all. So that is something, if you're a progressive group and that's a key thing, that's a must-have, then they wouldn't support me. That is a difference between us. But otherwise, absolutely, I was interested in getting the Workers' Party nomination. I interviewed with them. I talked to the unions. There's still some unions who haven't made up their minds. There are a lot of other entities, and I will be getting other endorsements. Just watch this space.
Understood. I'm curious.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one follow-up. I'm curious, given the rather startling failure of the American healthcare system to respond to this pandemic, would you envision supporting legislation that might require public and private hospitals to increase the stockpile of essential material that we...
Absolutely, Bob. It should have been done before. Look, I was the executive director of this commission. We said the number one threat, if you look at weapons of mass destruction, chemical, nuclear, biological, we said it's biological, either from terrorists or pandemics. Then the Obama administration came in because our report was concluded the Bush administration was still in, but Obama had been elected. Obama came in. He understood this. They set up this whole group, to address pandemics. When Ebola broke out, he was ready. It wasn't perfect. They did a lesson learned. I skimmed through the report. It's too long. And they looked at what can we do to further improve what we're doing. They brought the Trump team in and did an exercise with them. I mean, that's how worried they were, right? So it should have been done before. I mean, it is a failure. Look, this is the reality about government. This is why you need Congress to make these hard decisions sometimes for the executive branch. It's very hard to make decisions to spend money for something that doesn't look like an emergency on the day you have to spend the money for it, right? I mean, we know that in our own lives, right? You have to buy like life insurance, and you think to yourself, well, why am I buying? I'm spending this every day, but it's because someday maybe you might actually, die, and then what's your spouse going to do? Okay, you're not going to die, but or workers, work, whatever, some kind of insurance for your home, right? Your home you might have a flood, right? You want to make sure you're covered. Although flood insurance actually is another problem. But
right.
I won't go there.
So in closing, I have two non-campaign, non-political questions that I ask a lot of candidates just for the fun of it. I know you got to get your light. You got to go get the light. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, there you go. That's much better. Much better. Much better. So in closing, I have two non-political questions I ask a lot of candidates. It's just a fun thing. One, if your house was on fire and you can only grab three things, what would they be?
Oh my God. My house is on fire and I can only grab my glasses. I have severe myopia. So that would be bad. My glasses, three things. My glasses, I guess my cell phone, right? And what's the third thing? I don't know. I mean, I think nothing else probably. My glasses, my cell phone. I guess my purse, I need to have some cash and I have a little bit of cash in there.
So, and the second one is, if you were a superhero, who would you be and why?
Oh. Well, so here's the thing. Like, I'm not the best person to ask about like superheroes because I don't follow them that closely. But I have to say, I'm like a geek. I read too much and not enough comics. I would say, Wonder Woman.
Okay, and why? Of course,
Well, although actually no, I think Superman. Even though I'm a woman, because first of all, it's Gotham, it's New York. Second of all, he really was there to help the underdog, and that's kind of where my heart goes. So I would want to help the underdog that nobody else, no other human is helping. So I would want to go be Superman.
Cool. I like to answer only one correction. Superman was Metropolis, Batman was Gotham. So that's the only correction. No. You said you went to Gotham. But anything I didn't in closing, anything I didn't ask you.
You didn't ask me about like football.
Oh, okay. Well, next time that's gonna be my next question. No. So in closing, anything I didn't ask you, a chance to say your social media website and everything again?
I'd say Evelyn4ny.com. Vote for me because I have the experience, I have the compassion, I'll get the work done, no OJT required. And I want to hear from you. So write to us at Evelyn, FORNY, volunteer. We're going to win this thing. Don't forget to vote. Please get your absentee ballots right away for them. Go online. You can go to my website and request one. And also fill out your census forms.
Absolutely, definitely important for the census.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for taking the time. I understand the time is very important. I always appreciate folks, taking the time to speak to our audience. I don't take that for granted. So I would like you to thank you to take your time. And if you win the Democratic primary, I'd like to have you back on and discuss. You know what I'm saying? And and further why people should vote for you and maybe if possible whoever the Republican can and you together. So if you win, so we would definitely like to follow up on that. Thank you for your time. Wish you luck in your race.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, to some of the listeners, they had a lot of great questions, and some of them were long and 2, 3, 4-part questions. So I couldn't get to all of them, and I know 10 people that will be like, "You didn't ask my question," but I tried to get as much.
You have a section on the website where people can send questions.
Okay, say that again, so everybody say that again.
Evelyn, FORNY.com, where people can send questions. And sometimes I pick one, I do a little video.
So there you go. For the questions that I didn't get to ask, that you didn't get answers to, you can go to her website. Again, I just want to thank you for your time. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, AJ.
And,
thank you, Dr.
Yes.
Yes,
Take
good
care.
luck,
All right. Have a blessed day.
You too.
Yes,
All right. Dr. Bob, any last words from you that you would like to wrap up, talk about anything going on that you want to discuss since the last time we've been on? Or
well, I mean, I didn't hear the beginning of the show, AJ, but I do want to thank you, my brother, for allowing me to jump in rather spontaneously. I'm sure you addressed a lot of concerns about some of the developments that we saw in the city of Mount Vernon, especially this week.
Actually, we didn't get a chance to. We were having some technical difficulties, and especially with her connection going on and off. So I was trying to make sure I got her, and we went pretty much straight into the show. So in the interview, we didn't actually do much of an intro.
Well, it gives me an opportunity, firstly, to say that I'm sure I speak for everyone involved with People Before Politics in expressing our condolences for the loss of the fireman that was announced on Facebook over the past 24 hours. I'm not sure if you saw it, AJ.
Yeah, I shared. I think I shared it. Caitlin Gleason shared it, and I think I shared what she shared.
Right. I know that we speak on behalf of the entire Mount Vernon community in saying that we're deeply saddened by the loss of one of Mount Vernon's bravest. And also, I'm sure, I'm concerned about the anti-Muslim statements that were made, unfortunately, by another member of the Mount Vernon Fire Department, Robert Bobby Versace. I have been a strong proponent, I think as many of our audience members are, of religious and political tolerance of difference that is part of the American fabric. And I was deeply disappointed and alarmed to see these anti-Muslim statements that were made by a member of the Mount Vernon Civil Service in violation of my understanding of social media policies and the esprit de corps. I think that's required for a emergency service unit like the fire department to function effectively, especially in this moment of national crisis. I certainly look forward to further reports about the actions that the administration, the Patterson-Howard administration, will take in order to sanction this person in a way that is both proportionate with their violation, but also sends a clear, strong message that Mount Vernon will not tolerate acts that are betrayal of the very principles that make our democracy run. And also, I have to say, quite frankly, an attack on not only the Muslim community, but the African-American community, where the Muslim faith has been a very strong alternative to mainstream Christianity. That's my 2 cents, and I know I'm echoing a lot of remarks that appeared in your piece several days ago about
Right.
this.
I'm gonna share that in a link in a second. For those who don't know what we're talking about, but I did want to thanks for bringing that up. Because I did want to read. I had a statement from County Legislator Lyndon Williams, who texted me well after the article was written, and I just wanted to share his, since it was after the article, share what his thoughts were.
Right.
His thoughts are exactly. Unfortunately, we are at a time in this country where some feel empowered to publicly express racist and Islamophobic and, not animosity.
This is looking at me.
Okay, mutual. Okay, yeah, we can. Animosity that they harbor against people who look different or worship different than we do. As a society, we must continue to strongly condemn these hateful views and exercise vigilance to ensure that these hateful views are not translated into conduct that violates the civil and constitutional rights of Muslims and other persons. So that was County Legislator Lyndon Williams' statement. After reading the story, I had sent it to him via text, and he sent that. So I would just wanted to have a chance to read that. But yes, for those who may not have seen it on Black Westchester, we covered a story of an employee for the Mount Vernon Fire Department. I think he's a mechanic. He made several remarks that were definitely racist towards Muslims. I'm pulling it up now so I can definitely share it with y'all. But long story short, the comment that was made, just so you know, it says, bear in mind that Islam is not a religion. It is a social political cult using religious trappings towards its goal of dominating the West. Because it is not a religion, instead is a threat to our way of life. It is an affront to the concept of freedom of religion to put this cult in its place out of America. Muslims should be banned from public office and positions of authority and prohibited from building mosques. The problem with that, in a city like Mount Vernon, we have a Muslim fire chief. The chief of the fire department is Muslim. I think a deputy chief is Muslim. We have several firefighters that are Muslim. And in Mount Vernon, we elected our first Muslim city court judge in 2016. So, in a city like Mount Vernon that is multicultural, it's a shame for those kind of remarks to be made. And the comment that, and I went further by saying that, how can you trust this individual to work on the fire trucks and that are being driven by Muslims, when he has a great disdain for Muslims and does not even respect that as a religion and as a cult and that needs to be done away with. So I think there is a social media policy now. The city of Mount Vernon, it was harder on a firefighter for making comments before there was a social media policy, and he was suspended for a very long time and just about lost his job. And I believe that this should be dealt with the way we deal with anti-Semitic statements that are made. I think that he should be suspended at the very least. And basically that's what the article was about. So I wanted to, I thank Bob for bringing that up. That was an article we did this week. And also, we got an interview tomorrow with a boutique in a black owned business. And yeah, I just shared the link in the comment section for those who have not read the story and did not see it. That's the link right there, so you can see the statement itself. And I got quotes from several some elected officials, the fire commissioner, the mayor, and others, and a local Muslim imam and a Christian preacher. So I just, wanted to share that. That's been one of the big hot spots. One of the other stories we worked on, and I'm going to do an interview tomorrow, is a black-owned business receiving a letter from their lawyer saying basically they had 30 days to move. They have to get out by May 31st, and there is some sort of a state eviction moratorium, and basically that's not how you handle things, and it's just a scare tactic to get her out of there. And we're going to have an exclusive interview with her tomorrow. Her shop is called Weezy D. It's a ladies' boutique in Bronxville. And Damon and I also did an interview with Tanya Connors earlier today with protesting a store in Yonkers. If you didn't see that, I'll try to post the video up later. A store in Yonkers where they accused a young man for stealing, and they basically beat him down. And then when his brother tried to intervene, they beat the brother down. And then the two brothers ended up getting arrested and charged. So she's holding a protest with social distancing. She can't really protest out in front of the venue right now, but she's calling for a boycott of this business shop there, I believe, in Yonkers on Main Street in Getty Square. So those are the big stories we did this week. We're on tomorrow at 11, both on Facebook and on WVOX. We'll be talking to the owner of Weezy D, the black-owned Bronxville boutique. With that, I know Bob's cannot hear me. I want to see if he had any last words. Any last words? Any last words before we go out?
No, AJ, no last words.
Your mic's not-
I'm here with my mom. I'm not going to put on camera. She said that I was very smart and not and not doing so, but she conveys her well wishes to everyone, and I do as well. And I'll of course talk to the audience next week. And to you, my man, I'm sure we'll talk during the week, brother.
Yeah, see me, call me before you leave.
Yeah, I'll call you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Call me.
I remember. I remember.
All right. So, all right, no doubt. So with that is the we come to the end of the show. Thank everybody for tuning in. This People Before Politics, up episode 260. This is a little condensed version because we've been doing it a little more frequently. Again, check us out tomorrow on WVOX and on Facebook Live, the Black Westchester Power Hour, Damon and myself. And yes, any questions, just hit me. Shout out to those who I did see: Marvin Church, Clinton Earl Abrams, Lionel Turner, Jack Toons. Jack Toons said Christians were in the KKK. That's absolutely correct. Let me see who else, if I can shout anybody else out real quick. Oh, Jeff Monroe, definitely. Shireen, a friend of Damon's. Paul Anthony Cuesta, Sandy Barnaby, Dawn Seawright, good evening to you. Everybody else who tuned in. What was this gentleman's name again? He had a very long comment. Michael Cole, and I apologize because if you see in the comment section, this was a very, very, very long comment, and it was actually 3 or 4 questions, and I needed him to break it down to something smaller, so I didn't actually get a chance to read that. Clifton Earl Abrams, I think I said your name. Louise Cherico, Claudette Giles, she's tuned in for a few. And everybody else who tuned in, I want to thank you all. With that, we're out. Check us out next week. Check us out next week. And check us out tomorrow on WVOX and on the Black Westchester Power Hour. Peace.
Victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim. of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 Hold on. And are not afraid to say it.
Stop.